So we always like to start off on a personal note. So where are you born? Where are you raised? What did your parents do? And then perhaps maybe talk about what's the first program that you were proud of writing? So let's start with you.
Okay, well, so I was born and raised in the Silicon Valley. I grew up on a street where all the dads, and back then it was dads, were engineers. And this was in the time when Silicon Valley was mainly silicon, not software, not personal computers, not the internet, not mobile phones, but silicon. And I can remember my dad had this workshop in our garage. We had like resistors and transistors and circuit diagrams, and he built stuff. And I watched it, and I helped him install the burglar alarm in our house, and I helped him build the TV that sat in our living room. And as a young girl, I built a handheld radio, and it was just, I thought that's what everybody did. I mean, isn't that what all girls do at that age? So it was just what I grew up with, and I loved creating things, making things, and I guess that was the first spark. And oftentimes those dads that were engineers, right, it was very common for them to come up with an invention, to obtain a patent, to get venture capital funding. And some of those companies succeeded, some did not, but a few that did really revolutionized the world and the way in which we live. So I thought, there is nothing cooler than to be doing startup work and inventing things and creating things and making products and bringing them to the marketplace. So that was what I grew up with, and I always wanted to be a part of the innovation.
So when did you start coding? Like, what was your first Hello World? What language was it in?
Yeah. So I was coding, I can't, how old was I? I mean, this was before there were these programs like Girls Who Code. And my first computer program, I think, was the famous Hello World in C. Followed by the centigrade to Fahrenheit converter. I then got more sophisticated, and then later on, I don't know if you all remember this, but artificial intelligence, they were trying to make computers seem intelligent, and then there was this program called ELIZA, and it was basically the psychiatrist asking questions, and you give them answers, and they parrot back, and it resembles intelligent.
That's Siri's father, isn't it?
Yes, correct. And then, so that was the next program, and then eventually for my graduate work, I did an AI program that has to do with qualitative analysis of nonlinear system using AI techniques and computer vision and digital signal processing. But that's all I remember about it.
That sounds as long as your title, actually.
Yeah.
So
I do program in more languages than I speak, which is a point of pride for me as I run America's Innovation Agency.
So, what are some of the languages?
Oh, now then I have to date myself. That would be too embarrassing.
Okay, sure, no problem. So actually, the tidbit of information, I heard that you were, this is not tech related, but I heard you were a pretty good ballerina.
Where did you get that? So yes, well, it is my passion. Okay. I mean, with all the techie, analytical, quantitative things that one does, you have to have an outlet. Yeah. And my creative outlet is that I am passionate about classical ballet. And in fact, I danced for 16 years. And if you want to talk about something that pulls me into a different realm, watching a really good performance of a classical ballet really transforms me into a different world. I watch the dancers, and when they land it right and they jump just right, I'm like, beautiful. If they miss their mark, I'm like, oh, not so good. But it's a very hard, and very demanding physical endeavor, and that's my other passion.
Wow. So programming and then ballerina,
you got to balance the techie and the fuzzy.
Yeah.
If you had asked me growing up in the Silicon Valley as a young girl, building my handheld radio with my dad and the TV in our living room, if I ever thought that I would be in Washington, D.C. one day, head of the United States Patent and Trademark Office, I would say no. I never would have imagined it. I never thought about it. I figured I'd be in the Silicon Valley, and that's what I did for really almost the entirety of my career. But what I came to realize is that what I like to do is I like to help support and be a part of innovation. So whether that's as an engineer, whether that's as a startup lawyer advising startup companies and helping them succeed, or whether that's as being a part of in-house counsel at a young startup company or a young company that grows into a big multinational company that is very innovative, I like to support innovation. And I realize that in the United States, we have this incredible system. We are one of the most innovative societies on this planet at any time in history. And it's not by accident. In part, it's because we've got these great financial systems. We have venture capital funding. We have, secure sources of financing where you don't actually have to put your own money out to bring your dreams and make it a reality. In part, it's because we have laws and so forth that encourage it. But also, I believe it is because we've got an intellectual property system that gives you protection so that you can recoup and the rewards of your hard work and your investment. And because of that, American society, plus we were just scrappier. We were in a new country. We had to create a new country out of nothing, right? So you're going to be resourceful and scrappy. So by virtue of our tradition, by virtue of our DNA, by virtue of our laws, we are a very innovative society, but you cannot take that for granted. And I grew up in the Silicon Valley, and as I mentioned, you had startup companies, and you had these individuals who were creating a lot of economic prosperity for a region. Not all of them succeeded, but for those that did, they created a lot of benefits for their communities. And so wanting to be a part of that and wanting to make sure that that persists for generations to come, I think so long as we continue to invent and so long as we continue to maintain our entrepreneurial spirit, our country will do just fine. We'll work through a lot of the other issues. But, policies can be too heavy-handed. Laws can be too heavy-handed, or they could be not strong enough. All of that has impacts on innovation. And so having experienced what I experienced from the tech world, from the business world, I wanted to make sure that our society continued to remain innovative. And so in my very small way, with my bit of expertise that I had gathered, I thought, what a better thing to do and to ensure or try to help ensure that we continue to be innovative and we reward and incentivize the creation of new products and services that are shipped all over the world.
I'd like to switch gears here and talk about, so again, this is probably the most type of questions I would get from startups and startup founders, especially when it comes to software. So I want to talk about patents for software. There's a continuing debate between innovators and like, hey, should we protect our algorithms, their software, or should they go open source, or should they just keep innovating and make a trade secret? Like, what do you think is the best way for a startup to protect their IP, and does it make a difference?
Yeah.
Depending what it is, software or hardware?
So I was head of patents and patent strategy for my prior employer, and I did advise a lot of startup companies on their intellectual property strategy. And I mean, you're talking about software in particular, but what I will say is an intellectual property strategy has to be a piece of your business strategy. Now, it varies depending upon the technology sector that you're in. If you're in the biotech pharmaceutical sector, you may be very key patenting, making sure those things are airtight, rock solid. But even if you're not, I mean, in the whole range of other industries, what your IP strategy should be depends upon a whole variety of factors, including your competitors, what they have, where you think you will do business, both domestically and overseas, and your technology area. And in the area of software, what I will say is that software is patentable. Okay. Now, there have been a lot of rulings recently from the courts that have been narrowing the scope of patentability, but it is patentable. Now, whether you should or not, whether you should protect it with a patent, whether you should open source it, whether you should protect it via trade secrets or copyrights, I mean, each one of those forms of intellectual property protection has different advantages and disadvantages. A trade secret is only good so long as it's kept a secret. A copyright only protects the particular expression that you've put either written or coded, and a patent is one of the stronger forms of intellectual property. But again, I'm not saying it's right for everybody, but you need to at least go through the analysis of what the various forms of intellectual property rights are, what your business model is, who your competitors are, what their strategies are, where you might like to go next in future incarnations of your products and services, and really think ahead. Because if you're not filing and you're not thinking about those things, then you're in essence making a decision, right? Because you could end up forfeiting some of those rights. So whatever it is, all I'm saying is, I'm neither pro-patent, anti-patent, pro-copyright. I mean, you need to do what's right for your business, but make an informed decision. So one of the advantages of the regional offices is that we offer these kinds of programs to kind of help step entrepreneurs through these things. We also have an online intellectual property assessment tool where you can go online. I mean, your startup may have a number of things. It may have some code. It may have it certainly has a brand, right? You're going to want to protect your brand. You're going to want to register your mark to protect your brand. And what company doesn't have a brand? But these are the kinds of things you can go online and using our IP assessment tool, you answer some questions and they can it can give you some brief overviews of what intellectual property assets you might have. You can make a business decision as to whether or not you want to protect it, and then you can get information about how to protect whatever you wish to protect in whatever format you wish to protect it in. I mean, eventually, right, you will probably want to consult a lawyer, but this just helps you walk through some of the very basics so that you just can get a sense. But, it should be concerted decision making. It shouldn't be although I do recognize, with all the demands of the startup world and so forth, right, getting your product to work and the new features launched, right, it oftentimes slips to the lower end of the list, but I would not leave it. I would think about it proactively and dedicate some resources to make sure that you're making smart decisions at the time, and you can always adjust, and you will need to adjust as your business strategy varies. But it needs to be a part of any well thought out business strategy. And it helps get funding too.